Hello everyone listening to this podcast session. My name is Aleksa, and this is Max. We will be talking today about our experiences with Flutter and Compose Multiplatform. So I'm coming off from the Compose Multiplatform perspective as being co-founder and technical director of Aetherius, where we basically build mobile apps for many different clients. Max is doing a similar thing just with Flutter products. So welcome, Max, to this podcast episode. So thank you for grabbing the time to be here, and let's hear a short introduction from your side. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, good evening because it's Friday evening while we're recording. So enjoy everybody as before party and let's listen to this podcast. So thanks for introduction, thanks for the time. And yeah, as Alex said, I'm Flutter guy. I started with my co-founders running Flutter company. We are now Flutter consultants, actually officially listed at Google website. We are mainly doing Flutter, but we are also focusing on every other supporting technology, which makes us full stack. Of course, we are not doing every technology available on market. We try to avoid heavy technologies like Java or C#, but we are happy to support, for example, JS. Yeah, I'm doing technical things. I support clients and as well manage products and also hands-on experience participating. At peak, we had around 30 people in our company. And yeah, let's roll it.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Thank you very much, Max, for this short introduction. So, as we mentioned, so your, I would say, main area of expertise is Flutter, but I'm curious to hear more about how did you start with Flutter and why did you pick it? And yeah, basically your first, what were your first steps with the technology?
Okay, I wonder what to share my personal story or company story. I'm leaning towards actually sharing a bit of personal story. Maybe we'll do same with you. So what you need to know, firstly, I was kinda IT geek at the very beginning. So one day I installed Hackintosh on my Windows laptop. And then I started learning iOS native development, so that's my real background. That was, some day ago, like engineering period, first job, whatever. Then actually it evolved in more serious projects, first apps. And that few years passed and actually my Hackintosh died because drivers were no longer supported by by actually supported because that's also custom software put it into my desktop. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I end up having Mac, and that's how I end up actually starting Flutter development because Flutter back then was kind of on the raising period. So yeah, it was getting very popular, but it was still very, very early for that framework to consider it production ready. But anyway, it was getting a lot of traction and I found it really easy to get into. So I installed everything and it was ready to run. In comparison to iOS development, which required, specific configuration for iOS, that Flutter actually allowed me to kick off running apps for Android and iOS in the same time. And back then, I found it really cool and I started doing Flutter. Then, some time passed and I met with our two other co-founders and that's how we started. We bet everything on Flutter technology. We wanted to be Flutter experts because what we found was actually, some kind of expertise. We wanted to be expert in given framework. We never really wanted to be all around guys doing everything and doing nothing in the same time. So that was kind of risky, but after the time, I say it paid off. How about you? What's your story with Compose platform? Because my story actually evolved from being geek to company and doing stuff like now. Like now, I'm more open-minded to technology, but I still with Flutter. So I'm absolutely interested in from your side about this.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, mate. From my side, like we started, I am primarily a iOS engineer. So I've been doing iOS for quite some time now. And then when we were working for Germany client on one of their client apps, they at some point said, okay, we're migrating all of the apps to Kotlin multi-platform. That was like the first moment I heard about the technology. It was around 3 years ago, I would say. And I was like, okay, if these guys are willing to bet on Kotlin multi-platform, and they had big clients like, I don't know, Porsche, Volkswagen, big apps. And I was like, if they're willing to bet their big company apps on Kotlin multi-platform, there might be something there. So we kind of went down the Kotlin multi-platform road because of that. We worked together with them on migrating the app, which we did for them, to Kotlin multi-platform. That was the first one. Then we started using it for some smaller startup projects we had at that time. The Kotlin multi-platform was still similar to your story with Flutter, not ready for production. So we kind of had to do all of the workarounds, which are now, fast forward 3 years, fixed by the JetBrains team. But we had to do all of the things ourselves. So, for example, we wanted to share the entire view model, so we had to drag and drop the library for sharing view models and make some adjustments in order for that to be possible. So it was like it was pretty technically heavy, but I think it was worth it now when I see it. And then after Kotlin multi-platform, it was kind of natural for us to experiment and play around with Compose multi-platform. And we had one startup project who wanted to migrate from React Native to something else, and we found that as an opportunity to utilize actually Compose multi-platform, and it's working pretty well. So we have now, usually our startup projects are in a mixture of Kotlin multi-platform and Compose multi-platform. And for us, a big deal was a learning curve, because at that time we had Android engineers, strong Android engineers in our team. So although we tried Flutter, and we liked it, it was basically a business decision. Since we are already skilled with Android, Compose, Kotlin, let's go with Compose multi-platform, even though it's just a couple of months ago it's production ready on iOS. Even though Flutter was mature, we kind of decided to bet on Compose multi-platform as well. And yeah, we'll see how that will go. I see more and more adoption. Well, I still see Flutter more, but I think in the long run the number will be equal. So learning curve actually for our team was a huge thing and huge benefit of Compose multi-platform. And I wanted to ask you that as well. So you said that you were able to pretty quickly pick up Flutter and start working on it. How was that learning curve for you? How was Dart for you? As I would say, like, a little bit different programming language when compared to Kotlin and Swift. So what are your experiences with that?
Oh, here's what I see. Okay. Actually, I wanted to say that you already talked about many interesting things I would like to ask you about, but I was so hesitant, I didn't want to interrupt you, to be honest. But yeah, same similarities and same interesting topics. Maybe I hope we'll discuss it later, to be honest. I already have them. Yeah, when it comes to adoption, for example, we had different engineers trying to learn Dart, let's start from the beginning. Because yeah, as you already mentioned, you had some Android experience, Kotlin experience. So that was pretty beneficial for you already because you knew the language. So this is one of, some say the disadvantage, some say the advantage. And I know who says it disadvantage. But basically you need to learn Dart, which is pretty new language, and it's basically for this framework. I mean, I don't see any other applications for this language apart from Flutter. Of course, there are small backend frameworks, there are small CLI programs, but everything, is still next to Flutter or Flutter itself. So there is, that thing that you need to learn that language. But here is a actually better part because Dart was designed to be kind of familiar with Java, C, and JavaScript. And I already you can think, oh my God, mix of everything, mix of nothing, not good. But no, actually, as far from I can see from my experience and working with people, programmers actually like Dart, and I like Dart personally. And me, after being, after iOS, after having some knowledge with C#C, I actually found myself pretty comfortable with Dart. I mean, these object-oriented patterns, other patterns were pretty familiar with me, and I didn't have, much trouble learning that language. There is one other thing I would like to highlight that some people actually choose Dart just not to write JavaScript. That's
Yeah.
fact. I mean, some people don't like JavaScript so much that they do willing any to do to not write JavaScript. And that was me also at the very beginning. I didn't really like JavaScript and HTML syntax. Nowadays, things a bit change. Actually, nowadays, I like JavaScript for backend and Node.js, actually.
Mhm.
So, yeah, but the very beginning, that was the thing. But
Yeah.
still, when it comes to learning curve for Dart itself, it's pretty easy to enter. I believe you can, if you are familiar with programming, you pretty quickly can start delivering things. But then it gets complicated. I mean, there are some things like make sense, generators, strings, yada yada. And then you actually find yourself, there is cool website, I'm actually cool table in Dart API reference, which is called modifier reference. And you can see there is like huge table with all class modifiers possible for Dart. And people knowing Dart already know what I'm talking about. You can specify, final class, base final class, interface class, and everything is a bit different. It's, in most cases, you probably not really need to know everything. You can just read documentation, but to understand how it works and what it's really for, that's when challenge comes. So that's how I would evaluate Dart, to be honest.
Yeah.
Pretty friendly for beginners, but yeah, it has some nuances and has some, old thingies, relics from the past. For example, there is thing that list has some features like growable in initializers, and it is like a relic from the past because they started list in some way, and then internal team started to building evolving Dart, and they have to ensure backward capabilities compatibilities. They actually needed to leave some things, and that's pretty annoying. Yeah, so that's how I would evaluate the Dart, to be honest. By the way, that's pretty interesting. Did you start with Java and migrated to Kotlin, or did you do some other path? No, you
Yeah.
said you actually at iOS, but you have like internal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful perspective of Flutter. Actually, I loved it because, like, as you said, and probably it's, I would say maybe the common thing about mobile development in general. So usually things are easy to pick up when you're like, I don't know, have experience with iOS. You can probably easily pick up Kotlin, Compose. You can pick up Flutter. But once you start actually diving in deeper into these nuances and small differences and trying to understand why do you put final class, why do you do this, why do you do this, that's when the things actually complicate. Because as you know, like for example, if we talk about building UI, so you have Swift UI now, you have Compose, you have
yes, that's true.
widgets. They're relatively similar. Like I can guarantee that anybody with experience in Flutter can easily pick up Swift UI and Compose, and vice versa. But when it comes to those kind of technical difficulties, like the small things which make sense to think about, once you're advanced in technology, that's when it gets a little bit trickier. So just wanted to say wonderful perspective. And for us, yes, we started with some Java at that time, but we quickly switched over to Kotlin. Actually, Java, it was for Java and Vue. but a lot of projects, I think maybe, I don't know if there is a thing like that legacy in Flutter, but for example, on iOS and Android, like a lot of code bases which are large scale applications still have some Java, still have some Vue, still have some Objective-C. Is that a thing with Flutter being relatively new framework? Is there like something which is legacy in Flutter? Is there something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. But not in the way you are talking. I mean, yeah, you are absolutely right. I met project, especially for example, in banking. They are super legacy. And this is like switching from, I don't know, version 20 to version 8. And that is like, decades of honestly switch. And yeah, definitely there is legacy in Flutter because there was like one major switch, changing Dart from early versions to null safety. Because at the very beginning, Dart didn't cover full soundness null safety. And then after version 2, then 3, they started actually requiring full soundness, and that changed a lot. I mean, from programmers and semantics perspective, it wasn't so hard to understand the concept and to understand the changes. There was even dedicated tool to migrating all projects. But the real challenge was to migrate whole project to new version of language. One
Mhm.
feature, one by one, not hard. Adding null safety to one page, not hard. Adding everything to one big project written in old version of language and having old dependencies which were old as well, that was nightmare, and we did it more than once. And it was like, honestly, like, what's happening there? Of course, we tried to use that official tool. We did migrate pages one by one. We did migrate whole projects, and as far, that's really what I remember most, to be like
So
having that
you
whole project with all noodle code and like 3,000 errors in the code base, and like, oh my god, what happened? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly what
yeah. And like you said, you could actually migrate just one, I will, let's say, module of the app, and then the other one, and then the other one, and like, let's say, gradually adopt the newer version, right?
that's true, but it's not so easy if you are deploying to App Store and Play Store.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually you have a lot of dependencies in your project, and if you bump just two of them and found that another few of them requiring another version, or more obsolete version of language, then it starts to be trouble. One of my favorites, Firebase Crashlytics, for example, a lot of unexpected problems. Then another, state management solutions, and for example, freeze package. That's also, but there is like routing package, auto router, and it changes every version. And that's also like, it's not even, but these are things you are actually really don't like about Flutter. That if you left project for 1 year and wanted to bump everything at once, then it may be not so simple. That's
Yeah,
my
so
point.
do you think that the libraries are changing frequently, and like those are not some small changes, and you're being actually dependent on a lot of libraries, and if you want to change everything at the same time, it's almost impossible to bump all of the versions.
That's true, but actually that also came by Flutter nature because, as you know, that Flutter was designed to deliver quickly MVPs and
Mhm.
for both platforms, and
Mhm.
then evolve that unless you are reaching that production level. Nowadays, Flutter is considered more production ready than it used to be. But
Mhm.
still, that philosophy actually agrees with this approach, that take dependency, bam, 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 pull all together, deliver MVP, you're done. But if you are doing full serious, production ready app for big client, corporate client, whatever, then I would say you need to be way more cautious about choosing dependencies and migrating everything and following, for example, each Flutter version, because you can see that, I don't know, did you enter GitHub Flutter repository?
I don't think I do.
Okay, guess the number of issues.
500.
No, thousands. I believe like
Really?
open tickets are like 100 something. Those are like
Oh, wow.
pretty ridiculous. And you can find very obsolete ones. For example, issues or bugs from 2020, and it happens. It happens. It generally happens, and you need to be aware what you are choosing from. So it's not like bam, and it's working.
Mhm.
So yeah, in most cases, that philosophy works. So yeah, pull it all together, bam, bam, bam. But if you working in long-term project, you need to look at things in a little bit different perspective. So that's really it.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful perspective. And when we're talking about like Flutter being, let's say, switched to a framework which was primarily being developed, as you said, for building fast MVPs, to something which is, I think, Flutter. I was pretty much surprised when I heard about a lot of big players using Flutter for their apps, which are super large scale and things like that. So, and one of the main things which come into discussion when we're talking about using cross-platform languages are performance. So what is your opinion about performance in Flutter? Did you maybe have some scenario where your client said the app is not performant enough, this is not behaving correctly on iOS, on Android, there are some nuances? Did you maybe experience something like that?
Oh, absolutely. We had a lot. Absolutely, but in most cases, there is a golden rule about Flutter development. If everything works, then you shouldn't optimize a lot.
Okay.
Because, from the very beginning, Flutter is designed in a way and provides that core foundation, which should be pretty happy with delivering at least 60 FPS.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not doing something really wrong, you shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
experience a lot of frame drops. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but once you start building on it, adding more and more things, that's where things can go wrong. So there are some ways where you can destroy your Flutter app. For example, you can have very, very nested widgets.
Okay.
So for example, imagine there is a page, there is a list, there is another list, there is button, and there is everything beneath that. And you add a lot of text on top of that. And let me add another thing, very long list
Okay.
without given height. What does
Oh,
it mean? It
out of
does mean
time.
that, yes, that framework needs to calculate our boundaries or constraints and let's add another thing, animation on top of that. And
Okay.
now you can find yourself in a lot of trouble if you are, for example, animating whole page instead of small pieces. So that's how you can actually go really easy into trouble with Flutter.
Mm-hmm.
And you should know some ways how to optimize that thing. And you basically should follow that rules. But if you are building, Hello World app, you're adding HTTP requests, and you're adding, I don't know, let's say Redux store on top of that, and you are not storing a lot of cache, you should be fine. You should deliver 60 FPS easily, and you should deliver even 120 FPS relatively easily, to be honest.
Nice,
What's
nice. And
more?
yeah, what as you said, if you know a few things, you can easily optimize it. So I'm curious, like what are those things like? Is that like, for example, in which you shared like don't animate the whole page if you only need to animate one, one row, add a fixed height to a list view. Are those kind of things, right?
Yes, indeed. And for example, you don't need to use heavy widgets if you need simpler ones. Another example, there's container. Container has property which is padding, but
Okay.
there's another widget which is just padding, so you don't need container with all that features. And you know, that's simple steps. But at the end of the day, combining these all steps actually makes your app premium, you know,
Nice, nice,
because, you
nice.
know, what do you think? You know, what's the premium experience of the app? I would say, you know, like smooth transitions, small bit of animations, and everything works correct. So yeah, that's working fine. However, I can find one big disappointment,
Okay, I'm
which is Flutter Web. And I don't know if you actually experience Flutter Web apps, but they are loading pretty slowly. I mean, the first frame and then loading whole app takes time. It's not like immediate experience. So that's, for example, is where Flutter struggles, in my opinion. And you can find, you know, that this whole app actually, once it's loaded, then it works. That's fine. But you know, there's time until it starts working on web. It's actually a bit annoying.
nice. I was not aware. I was not aware that. I mean, I was aware that Flutter can like port similar to also Compose Multiplatform port the same code to the web, but I didn't realize that it has that kind of issue. So yeah, thanks for sharing. And shortly, I'll try to let's say parallelize that with Compose Multiplatform, coming from the experience which we had. And when we ported that React Native app to Compose Multiplatform, the first thing client said like it's behaving much better, it's way smoother. But both iOS and Android, but I think everything uh, in the end, and we also did some React Native, etc., etc. So in the end, it's always about the engineers working on the app. At least that's my opinion. So you can probably make things and I'm now talking about some basic things. As you said, you can make them performant in React Native, you can make them performant in Flutter, in Compose Multiplatform. It's about the way you're designing, and as you said, thinking about the small things, what modifier should you use, what approach should you use. So I think in the end, like, people are constantly like talking about this framework is slow, this is not optimized. And yeah, there are differences, but in the end, for most of the apps, like, it pretty much ends up to your development team, to your expertise. So that's why I think having experts in, at least in the mobile development area, is really important, because I feel people using mobile apps, I don't know if you feel that, but they are not patient at all as they were some time ago. So now if they see app flickering, if they see a drop in FPS, if they see something, they just quit the app, and they're never getting back. And that's how I see things actually at the moment. And when we're talking about these performance things, so how easy it is on Flutter to implement some native specific functionality. I know that, as far as I understood, all of these libraries, like, I don't know, camera permission, it has two implementations, on one for iOS under the hood and one for Android. So how easy is for you to make that, like, say customly, or and expose it as a library?
No, I think it's relatively easy. There are some nuances, there was some nuances, because actually what Flutter does, it communicates with native by channels. It is called platform channel. And
Okay.
basically what you are doing, you are exchanging data between Flutter and between native platforms. So you are
Mhm.
invoking some call, native does that, and it receives or sends back information, either it's error or either it's success, whatever. And you are basically implementing such interface to both platforms, or even
Mhm.
more platforms, because you can implement for desktop, whatever. And then you need to implement in native language, of course. So what I say, it's relatively easy. You should be very cautious with that platform channel, because you
Mhm.
can easily start it, kick it off, But in my opinion, where troubles arrive is handling it properly. Because, we talked about cross-platform. You can be cross-platform developer only, capable doing things only in that tool. You can just stay in Compose Multiplatform and do nothing at all in native. You can do same in Flutter, never exit Flutter for native. But then when trouble arrive, is handling that native nuances. So, for example, what native does when it ends, when it exits, when it
Mm-hmm.
throws,
Mm-hmm.
that you should know, and you should be aware that it's different for Android, it's different for iOS, and it's different for desktop. And you, as a Flutter developer, should be aware of that. So, looking from that perspective, no, pretty tricky. You need to know Android and all these behaviors. Mechanism, pretty easy to implement, pretty easy to start, pretty easy to communicate. The
Okay.
whole trouble arises with this, actually managing that connection in a good way and making it beneficial, because it's not business to delegate some calculation from Dart to native and not get improvements at all. That's what's the reason. The reason is to connect with API, of course, like camera, other stuff, image compression. That's very, very true, very agreed. But yeah, some things are not very good in Flutter, and as you mentioned, that camera connection is not perfect. It's
Mm-hmm.
there is good library for that, but I think it could be improved.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to deliver, better camera capabilities, then you need to dive into native, in my opinion. I don't know, what's your point on Compose multi-platform then?
Yeah, I think for Compose Multiplatform there is a similar setup where like in the shared layer you define some expect, for example, expect class which is camera manager, and then you in your because Compose Multiplatform is structured where you have common and you have iOS and you have Android, and inside Android you write the actual for that camera manager class, and inside iOS you write that actual for camera manager class writing Swift, and in Android you write it still using Kotlin. So actually, I have a feeling that it's slightly different in Compose Multiplatform because there are not a lot of libraries at the moment. So when compared to Flutter, where you have pretty much library for everything,
Right,
most of
that's
the yeah
awesome opportunity. You can
yeah
awesome opportunity. Now your turn to deliver awesome packages and be popular inside the environment.
exactly, and that's actually one of the things which we are currently working on. Like one of the libraries is for which we are developing for Compose Multi-Platform is analytics package, which enables easier like defining analytics events, mapping them to some, let's say, analytics manager class, and sending events through many different providers. So yeah, definitely that's a good catch which you shared. Like it's definitely an opportunity. It's definitely still early, and as I said, most of the things like we did for one of the apps like QR code scanning, like camera, we have to do it from scratch. And recently there is also similar to pubdev, I think, which is for Flutter.
Oh,
There's
okay.
similar page for KMP and CMP where you can find packages, but it's still a limited number of packages. So that's an opportunity, and for all of the people like diving into the Compose multi-platform, I think it's a good thing that actually when you need something, you still need to write it natively. It will give you a little bit, as you said, sense and feel what's going on under the hood. So when things stop working, you will know what could potentially go wrong. So it's from one side a benefit because you need to do it yourself, but from other side it's opportunity, as you said. And with that in mind, like how would you like not describe, but how does debugging go with Flutter? Do you need to do something specific to set a breakpoint inside iOS and Android to observe that endpoint, get some data, get some crash logs, for example, upload the debug symbols for iOS? I know that's a thing to get symbolicated crash log. Are those things relatively easy to do, or you need some additional setup along the way?
Yeah, one thing to add, by the way, to pub.dev, because I wanted to mention, like, currently I believe there are more than 60 state management packages for Flutter, which is kind of crazy, to be honest. And, but what's actually funny, people are building another ones. But, that's the perspective. And if that area is pretty free in Compose Multiplatform, you don't need to do a lot, to be honest. You can even copy some another state management solution and adapt to that platform. Yeah, debugging. Pretty easy, out of the box. I like run Flutter from VS Code mostly. I prefer VS Code and IDE in comparison to Android Studio and other things, especially like Vim. I think it's very convenient to run VS Code for different tools, different languages. But also what I like is configuration, which is just in JSON. You can put all specific for environments, for running, and for even extension recommendation in .json, and you can pretty customize that. In actually, why to bother with customization? Why not just to jump through the code and start doing things? But in my opinion, it's work in VS Code, because not only you have that all configuration and you have that IDE settings, but also this attaches debugger. And if you are running this from VS Code, you can also see that debugger is attached, and you can add every simple thing like breakpoints, but you can see that in VS Code as well. So that's pretty convenient, and you have access to, for example, profiler, which is already delivered with Flutter, and you can see what's happening behind scenes. So, for example, how much time is needed for frame, what through, what not. So yeah, I believe this is pretty good development experience. When it comes to delivering symbols to console, that's actually need to be done through native. I mean, from, for example, Xcode or other stuff. So you need to deliver it manually outside of the Flutter. But yeah, when it comes to all, and I want to say that these debugging tools are actually getting better and better. So I would definitely recommend using that, and leaning towards that whole small ecosystem. And honestly, I don't really remind myself the case that wasn't enough. I mean, I use, for example, Xcode profiler to see what's happening on the device, to see the battery impact. Because that's also reasonable to check if you are doing cross-platform apps. It's good to check battery impact, because that's not necessarily native, and your device can get hot. And yeah, that's the case. I wanted to see what's happening with CPU, with battery, but business logic, I mean, errors and other, that's data flow inside of the app, is pretty cool to debug with Flutter tools. I mean, I don't see much issue with that. Of course, I would see improvements. For example, for accessibility. I mean, you can see that accessibility tree inside of Flutter is displayed. You can debug it. But in my opinion, it could be, for example, smoother. It's not so super smooth. It's possible, but it could be better. Still, there are like solutions for that. Yeah, so that's my perspective on that.
Nice.
I wonder. Well, okay, your turn then.
Yeah, my turn. So regarding Compose Multiplatform, like, I think Android Studio is a go-to solution, because like all of the things are already being done under the hood. You can directly run for iOS Target through Android Studio. You can run on Android Target. You get breakpoint. You get you get everything. For running debug symbols, definitely that's something you need to do through Xcode data, upload the debug symbol script or something like that. But in general, Android Studio is pretty nice. What personally, myself and our team, when we're dealing with Compose Multiplatform, we are using a Juni AI for yeah, as an coding assistant, and it's working pretty nicely. It's embedded into IntelliJ, so we have it in Android Studio as well, and that's one of the also the reasons why we are using it as a let's say our technology of choice. And we tried, I tried personally trying to use Cursor for iOS development, and I tried. Cursor is basically a fork of VS Code, so but setting it up with things like extensions for getting highlighted Swift code, like SweetPad and a bunch of different things to actually make it work and make it build from Visual Studio Code was kind of not something that I enjoyed, to be honest. And it was,
okay.
yeah, I saw it as an overhead for me. Although the cursor experience itself was okay, so cursor was able to like help me out with the code, with generating stuff. But yeah, in the end, I fall back to using Xcode. And but for Flutter, actually, we have currently one Flutter project, and we are using also Visual Studio Code. We are using Cursor. And what is your opinion about AI tools for Flutter? We had great experiences with that. So what is your experience?
Okay, number one, I hate cursor billing changes.
Yeah,
Number
that's
two, I
correct.
hate cursor billing changes. Yeah, honestly, I remember the time when Cursor entered the market and it was pretty amazing, to be honest. But yeah, I found myself, I was doing one project and I basically talked with bot. I will share my AI chatbot rank list, to be honest, later. But yeah, Cursor, also I found it a bit of overhead. Maybe because we are indeed developers. It's in my opinion, it's more useful for vibe coders, whatever they
Yeah,
call them.
yeah.
And yeah, it's doing stuff. But what I found as well, by the way, there's pretty good alternative for Cursor, which is named Kilocode. I use that as well. It has pretty good ranking in deliverability. Cursor
What
is obviously a
in
bit better.
Code?
Yeah, Kilocode. It's
I did not
extension
know.
for VS Code. You can install it and it works similarly like Cursor, but you need to connect obviously your models and you're choosing your models. But they are both kind of have a tendency to enter nested loops. So they
Mm-hmm.
are doing
Yeah,
stuff and they are
definitely.
in constant loops trying to do something. And once you deliver all rules for them, it's pretty cool for laying foundation, for example, for page, for doing some patterns. But whenever you need to deliver something more specific, for example, I want to update this button after doing that, then it can go horribly wrong because they don't pay attention to that business logic so much. Of course, they're getting better, and it's super convenient to write unit tests for your page, for example, for your business logic. You are just saying to Cursor, yeah, let's write unit tests for that. And it delivers unit tests and it's mostly working. In 95% of cases, it's working. And it's also pretty convenient to write some layout structure with Cursor.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the end of the day, as a developer, you need to correct what it wrote, in my opinion. You should,
Yeah.
at least, to be honest, because you never know what's inside. And you see on that on screen and it's working. It's pretty cool because you quickly deliver the thing. But if you are really thinking that it's going to production in next week, in my opinion, you should read what's inside. So yeah,
Definitely.
super helpful for laying foundation or doing silly stuff like rewriting, generating test cases. Awesome.
Yeah,
But when it comes to solving real problem or predicting some kind of problems, for example, imagine you just have Amazon's AWS something and you don't care about reads from database. You can quickly find yourself in a big billing trouble. So yeah,
yeah,
that's something you need to be aware.
yeah,
But yeah, it's daily tool in my opinion. Still, as a programmer, you definitely can use that in some things, but you shouldn't rely on that completely because in my opinion, it's not that time yet. Yeah,
yeah,
personally, wanted to share my chatbot list. Personally,
yeah.
I like Sonnet the most.
Okay.
Then the second I found Gemini.
Uh-huh.
And then I use Grok, and what's interesting,
Oh,
GPT is not my first choice for development. I found Sonnet to be most reliable in most cases.
nice.
Gemini is also like, I think, universal.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Grok, in my opinion, it's too much words, too many words in the chat, and it's like super long.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's delivering interesting solutions to your problems. I mean, sometimes Grok really seems to think a little bit out of the box.
Nice, nice.
And when I started my journey with LLM models, actually GPT was the king. But like nowadays, I actually find GPT is like slightly more and more, deseeding. And I find really like that models I listed are definitely better to development tasks for Flutter.
Yeah, nice, nice, nice. Definitely, I will remember them to try them out. To be honest, we haven't tried them ourselves, so it's an interesting list. I will try it out. And just to shortly to get back to what you said, like definitely these constant loops are like the number one issue still with the assistant coding, and that's why I think still AI cannot replace engineers. And just like imagine a client or a stakeholder just typing something, and that then because like that mapping between requirement and what you need to be done is like still the main issue. Like all of them could like start from scratch and build something, but then you said paint me this button red here, on this place it should be yellow, but on all of the other places it should be like that, this should be like that. As soon as you start driving into the rabbit hole, it gets confused. But for if you, from our perspective, if you are able to prompt it and guide it, like say, hey, take this as a reference and do a similar thing, it can provide with some results. And definitely, yeah, you should be as a reviewer of that code. Like you should be the one who will be reviewing it, definitely. And what comes to my perspective then, like imagine requirements change for the screen which you made using AI, and then next week or in 1 month you come back to that screen, you have no idea what it made, and then you do again ask GPT to do it, and then two months ahead you then go back, and then you have a fatal crash, and then you can never fix it. So definitely something we should be super cautious about, and like still keep the things under our control. And one, I think, last question for today for us to cover, and then we can put some final words and thought about Flutter and CMP together. Is like from your West Flutter development experience, what is the biggest challenge which you had? It can be technical. It doesn't have to be technical. So, what is something which you struggle the most to achieve to create in Flutter?
Oh, oh my God.
Yeah.
What can I say here? That's actually very good question, and I believe that experience can be very deep when it comes what went wrong with Flutter, especially because we are present in that, Flutter journey from very early years of Flutter. But yeah, what I can think of is I will share maybe two. So the first one would be like a general experience with Flutter, because we started with very early with Flutter, there was no such thing like guidelines and like given architecture you should follow. So everybody actually back in the time tried to deliver some way of implementing apps in versatile and scalable way, ready for production. And some guys went for example, for MobX, some guys went for GetX, some guys went for block architecture written by themselves. And year by year, these apps, there were more and more apps. And you as a consultant, you as a digital agency, sometimes you need to see that app written in such way, and sometimes you need to see the app and deliver very quick bug fixes in another app. And the thing is, back in the time, they were doing absolutely opposite patterns or stuff. So, in my opinion, that got better because like now, for example, you can see recommended architecture at Flutter Docs. You can see proven libraries like Block, Riverpod, and people are following that. But years ago, when Flutter were starting, so it wasn't such a thing. It was like big, big sprint for doing apps in cool framework, but that pursuit to establish good community guidelines hasn't finished yet. It's just being more and more mature, but still. And this is like infamous example, which is GetX for Flutter. Also, indeed, it's very infamous because it's usually used like first example how to not build Flutter apps, but then you find like very big apps using that, and that's when it comes tricky, to be honest. And you need to find yourself in knowing different approach for building apps in that Flutter. So yes, that's very good one, and I believe people who migrated or upgraded apps are actually dealing with the same, and this is like never-ending story. And yeah, another thing is actually we had like big fitness app, like 2 million users, and that app was written in Cordova. It was not native or other stuff, it was Cordova. And establishing bridge between Flutter and Cordova, because we couldn't migrate app at once. We needed to communicate with old app. And that was something out of this world. So, communicating with that, thing, obsolete things, that was like never-ending story of interesting troubles. So yeah, that's the biggest one. I can find more, but let's not like it. Super interested to hear from your side.
Yeah, those are really really interesting ones. Just to quickly get back on both of these. So Getix, is it, as far as I maybe remember for somewhere on top of my head, it's for dependency injection or not?
It is all in one solution. You can change pages, you can build injection, you can actually control the app without passing context. And it's not necessarily wrong in building the apps. The things actually got pretty nasty when someone built MVP and then started building on top without following any patterns. Because you can imagine, like, oh, you built awesome 6-pager, and then you enter 7th page, and yeah, let's not pass context, let's not pass anything by proper flow. Let's just call that big data container at the top without passing anything. Let's just call it and forget it. And this is like pretty easy first step to turning your life into nightmare. So that's how it works. And it's not necessarily something wrong in GetX itself. It has tendency to quickly evolve into nightmare because people are overusing capabilities of that library.
Got it. So basically, it's an abstraction which, if you don't like understand and take care of, can gradually lead to you over abusing it. Got it. Thank you for the explanation. I was just curious to hear more about it. And the second one regarding Cordova to Flutter, like good job to pulling that off, for pulling that off. I never heard somebody working with Cordova. Actually, I never had a chance to talk with someone using that framework. We had at one point around, I think 3 years ago, some requirement for client from USA who required some Cordova experience, but we did not work on that project. So yeah, good job on pulling that through. So from our side, shortly, what was the biggest challenge for our team? Personally, I would say it's 2 years ago when we started doing Kotlin multi-platform, and then around 1 year ago, or I can remember, we started investigating Compose multi-platform. One of the main challenges which we had, because at that time, Compose multi-platform, if you did it like completely, just download the Compose multi-platform wizard project and then use it. It did not support the swipe back functionality on iOS.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, very natural gesture for native users.
exactly. And me being an iOS engineer and an iOS user, I was like, we cannot ship the app without it. So what we ended up using is like actually starting a Kotlin multi-platform project where we kept the native navigations on iOS side and on Android side, and then all of the screens were written in Compose multi-platform, so completely shared. Everything was Compose and Kotlin, and then inside iOS, we just inside native navigation use wrapped Compose multi-platform screens, and that's how we were able to, I would say, bypass the limitations which Compose multi-platform had at that point. And some time ago, I think 6 or so months ago, they were able to resolve this swipe issues, and now you get the native swipe back behavior, which in my opinion is really important for iOS users. So that's
very true.
yeah,
I mean,
that's Flutter has issues with that, or
no. Flutter actually supports that things natively.
nice.
But there is like another issue with semantics with that. It's not super important on super small apps, but if you are delivering, WCAG feature, then you want actually voice over to read components of the app in given order.
Okay.
And for example, there is a small issue which reorders the order of these things, and reads not
Sure.
header the first, but the back button first, and that's
Okay.
pretty annoying. So, but yeah, it was another issue back in the time. So you wanted to have callback after popping the screen.
Okay.
And dismissing screen with that gesture required some extra actions to not invoke callback in the wrong moment. So it was not straight out of the box. You needed to prepare your page for that to handle it properly. So that was issue I remember with that back button. But visual overall is out of the box. So that's good. If you apply side actions in 2025, it's still good. If you dive very deeply, you can find what I just said. For example, the WCAG thing, which is not perfect, but it's
Yeah, but it's good enough. You can find your
yes, indeed. You don't need to work around anything, to be honest.
yeah. Nice. And then for the final words, like you're working as a consultant, I'm working as a consultant. So a client comes and wants a mobile app. So do you immediately recommend them to start with Flutter, or maybe for some of the clients you advise something else based on current setup they have? So what do you think? What is the future of Flutter?
Okay, that's tricky one. Honestly, first thing is I ask, what's your timeline? What do you have? What do you want to have?
Mhm.
What technical capabilities you have internally,
Mm-hmm.
and where are you going? So yeah, these are my first questions, to be honest. And yeah, back in the day, I used to recommend Flutter for most cases, and this time I have some other things I wouldn't recommend Flutter for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you want to deliver quickly MVP and you don't have any other super constraints. Yeah, choose Flutter. Why not? It will handle 90% of your business cases. You can deliver pretty any business app which actually talks with server, which has authentication, which has some kind of payments. Why not? Feel free to choose Flutter. I'm here to help you. So it is probably the same when it comes to other features for your app when you want to build on top of that. If you're coming to me with your native app and you want to add some cross-platform screen, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we can embed Flutter and use that. Why not? And now, where what's the case when I don't recommend Flutter? So you're coming to me and you say you have Kotlin developers internally. So yeah, that's the place when you actually think of a Compose Multiplatform. Why not?
Yep.
So maybe you don't need any specific. Maybe you can do that in Compose Multiplatform. I don't know. You will answer in a second. I believe so. Another part, you're coming to me and you want 90% of 3D content. That's an
Mm-hmm.
issue in Flutter. I mean, you can't easily implement 3D features in Flutter. Of course, you can display some 3D objects and display some AR features, but if you wanted to have like truly 3D experience, Flutter is not your technology. It's pretty annoying, but it's not going to change soon because I don't see any environment community activity that will allow that. I noticed that they were trying to leverage Flutter GPU, but I don't see much progress in that. And another thing, if you for example ask me, can you deliver Flutter landing page with CEO? And I'm saying absolutely no, 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 no way. So yeah, these are the most important ones. I wouldn't recommend Flutter. I mean, Flutter is not for everything. One of disadvantage I found recently was liquid glass. So
Mm-hmm.
if
Yes.
you were absolutely dedicated and certain that you want to have liquid glass inside your app, then wow, Flutter is not your choice again because it doesn't support liquid glass. It can mitigate that, but it's not super performant and it's not super convenient to have liquid glass in Flutter right now. It would be much more convenient to employ, Kotlin multi-platform. Notice, not Compose multi-platform, Kotlin
Yes.
multi-platform and some native views. That would be way better use case for choosing if you wanted to have liquid glass like now.
Yes.
And another thing, I believe Kotlin has a pretty good way to play with XR and augmented reality. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the recent Android XR updates are pretty happy to play with Kotlin. And for Flutter, I believe that will be challenge, to be
Yeah.
honest. We have some experimental plugins, but what's what's the production solution for that? I'm not certain, and I'm saying I'm developing Flutter for years, and I'm not certain.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's wonderful, wonderful perspective of and overview. I definitely agree with you for regarding the liquid glass, and I think like in general, that's why I'm a bigger fan of Kotlin multi-platform than I am of Compose multi-platform because it gives you all of the flexibility way above any other framework. Flutter, React Native, Compose multi-platform can give you, Kotlin multi-platform can give you because you write views natively and you share the business logic, you can share the resources and things like that, but the UI gets to be written and rendered natively, which is one thing I love about it. And definitely loved the way you shared about the business side of things because I have a feeling that a lot of people who are working in some organization project, they don't think about the business side of things. So yeah, if you have Kotlin developers or already, you should go with that. If you want, for example, right now the choice for me between Flutter and Compose Multiplatform, I think both are now good to build MVP. But if you want something which will probably get you a little bit faster because it has more support from the community, more libraries and things like that, I would suggest Flutter. But if you want to bet in the long run, or if you want to expand, if you think of expanding your team into that like Android/Kotlin ecosystem, then definitely go with Compose Multiplatform. You have a bigger pool of Android developers, etc., etc. So those would be my thinkings about it. But to sum things up, I never recommend anybody starting now to build purely native. To be honest, I recommend at least Kotlin Multiplatform, because you can write native code if you need, you can share code if you need, you can do all of the things. If needed, do it shared. If not, do it natively. So that's kind of the summary I go with. So if we can go Compose Multiplatform, Flutter, React Native, okay. But if not, at least we do Kotlin Multiplatform. So that's kind of the overview from my side. So yeah, that's a wrap on this one, Max. So first of all, thank you for spending time here with us. Thank you for everybody who will be watching this, Max. Thank you on great insights about Flutter. It was wonderful to have you in this podcast. Thank you, Max.
Thank you as well. Amazing opportunity to talk and exchange different point of views. And yeah, thanks for the invitation.